Legal AI is getting better and innovating faster and faster. In-house teams are adopting it more rapidly, as well as big law firms. We see that there's a huge new creation of NewMods. Right now to date, there's about 40 plus AI NewMod firms, and they're getting funded by VC companies. What is the greater context of this when we see the veneer of hype that's around all these AI tools? Well, I'm Alejandro Tavera-Reyes, and I have an interview with Richard Tromans, the founder of Artificial Lawyer and a key analyst in the legal tech space. We're going to be interviewing him about all those topics and also how you, as a student, can understand how to use AI, all these new mods, and what you should be focusing on most to be successful when trying to be a lawyer.
Okay, don't forget to press record.
Yeah, we are on record, so we are good and ready to do it. So my first question is about in-house teams embracing traditional AI. So in a recent podcast, you said that from the conferences you had been to, in-house teams are embracing AI faster in this new wave compared to past waves. So why now, and what's different about this wave?
Yeah, sure. Well, it just simply it's the change in technology. So initially, that first wave of AI, which really started coming through 2015, 2016, was what is generally referred to as natural language processing slash machine learning, right? It was at the time groundbreaking, but it was very limited in what it could do, and it involved a lot of training. So the user, certainly in those days, actually had to train the AI tool on their contracts, and it was quite laborious. And a lot of people found it too slow, too difficult, too inaccurate, and uptake was very limited. As you know, and all your students know, the generative AI capabilities today are just incredible. Time to value is instant. Now, is it always accurate? No, but any in-house lawyer who just says something along the lines of, hey, could you just summarize that contract for me? Please pull out any provisions that relate to time span or term, whatever, right? It will just go bing, within 5 seconds, bang, you've got it. That speed, tendency towards decent accuracy at least, has made it so much more available, and it's developed a very strong buy-in. And the other reason, really, and this was always latent, is that in-house lawyers are obviously not paid by the hour, right?
Yeah.
They are working for the company. The company is their client, and they are paid a salary. And their goal is to do high value work, to remove risk, and anything that helps them, really anything that helps them, they will use, as long as it doesn't create new risks which outweigh the benefits. But overall, if technology is going to help them, they'll use it. There are no barriers there. And so this combination of rapid time to value, ease of use, and really very strong incentives to use something like that have really sort of come together. So the in-house world very much wants to use this technology, and that in turn creates a feedback loop which goes into the law firms who are selling their advice, their judgments, their ability to manage large pieces of legal work for the clients. Because if your clients are using this technology, how can you then sell your work and produce your work in exactly the same way it was done in the 1980s? It's a much harder proposition. So there's a very sort of positive feedback loop developing, and you're right to start off with the in-house lawyers because they're the clients.
And I mean, this makes sense in the context of I'm seeing right now every single day there's new mod that's being created. I think you've recently just posted something about, from what I remember, a while back ago, Keith and all the other stuff. So it's really interesting seeing that these new mods are selling for in-house, and that now I think, do you see then, as you were saying, the traditional law firms are going to start buying these tech, like
Well, I mean, in terms of the external legal advice side, I mean, what we're seeing at the moment are large law firms. I mean, my area that I focus on mostly is the big law commercial firms. They are adopting AI. They've been using AI for a long time, ever since it first became commercially available, more than a decade ago. But now they really are starting to use it at scale. Their challenge is structural, right? So, for example, let's say you're doing an M&A deal. The classic part of all M&A deals is what we call due diligence. I'm sure most of your students know all this already, but the due diligence part is you look at all the documents, you look at all the contract, you look at all the relating documents and so forth, and you have to go through and look for risks, right? Previously, you had to do that manually. You had to get a room full of like a dozen junior associates who would literally work till 3 o'clock in the morning every single night to wade through this information, and they would draw up sheets and sheets and sheets, usually on like on an Excel sheet, of issues, which then someone more senior would come back and check, right?
Yeah.
With AI, you can zip through that work now in a few hours. Now, it's not like magic. You need someone to oversee it and quality check it and dig into the details and so forth. It's not magic. There's no silver bullet here. But the general acceleration of that process is so massive that how on earth do you charge by the hour for that work? You're going to put yourself out of business. And it's questions like that which have created a lot of challenges for the big law firms. The big law firms want to use tech. You could argue, in fact, that big law as it exists today could never have happened without tech. I mean, the Microsoft suite, Word, email, redlining, the ability to redline a contract, send it back to the counterparty. They make some changes, they send it back, ping, 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 right? And the speed with which that can happen, to some degree, underwrote the growth of big law. You could not have the big law world that exists today without those tools, many of which we just take for granted. The same way we take, the electricity for granted. Where they are now is that they're bringing in all this AI technology, but they're trying to figure out how they will use it without causing any negative feedback on their business model. And the simple answer is that if they're truly going to absorb it at scale all the way through, they will have to change their business model to some degree. Now, the new model, or AI first law firms, they have a different set of problems. They generally sell on a fixed fee. They don't sell time. So, hey, can you review this contract for me? Yeah, sure, bang, it's $500. We'll get it back to you by the end of the day. So they're not selling the time that it takes to do it. They're just selling the expertise and the end product. You might say it's the commoditization, it's the industrialization of law. Humans are involved, skilled lawyers are involved, but the idea, and they're not trying to go as fast as possible. They're not like racing through it. They're not being careless, but they're trying to put as much of the legwork, the heavy work, into the AI processes. So they're trying to model the way that contracts should look. So give us your playbook. We'll run that with the AI over this new contract, and we'll pick out very, very quickly all the things that should change. And let's have a set of clauses, a clause bank, ready to be tapped to feed in the new language. And so on and so on. And just adding layer upon layer upon layer of automation, but using experts who do actually understand the law, who know what good looks like as well. And for them, they have a different problem, because if you're selling contract review at $500 a time, your challenge, unlike the big law firms, is not how to deal with the fusion of AI and the law. Your issue is just a very, very simple business one, which is, how do you make money? Right? How are you going to make, if you can't charge by time taken, how are you going to make any money? Because if you're only making $500 a day, that's not going to go very far in a law firm, right? So obviously you need volume. So you need a mass of these requests. So there's no easy answer, right? The new model AI first law firms don't have a magic bullet either. They have a different set of problems. And the big law firms, they're making huge amounts of money. They're tremendously in demand. They generally, most successful law firms never have a lack of work, right? I mean, it's an
Yeah.
incredible business to be in. It's just like this endless line. It's like a blockbuster movie, and everyone's lining up down the street to get in. Right. That's what the onboarding in a major law firm is like. It's just a continuous flow of work, which is why they can always increase their rates. Right. If you didn't have continuous, almost rising demand, and it is rising demand in during some periods of the market, you won't be able to increase your rates every year. Right. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating time. It's a fascinating time, and also, I mean, you've got to remember on the buy side, the clients, they do want to save money, but they're sophisticated buyers as well. They're not foolish. If they're doing a very, very large M&A deal, for example, they're not just going to go deliberately to the cheapest provider, right? The sophisticated buyers might, what they call, unbundle the work. So they say, right, the negotiation bit, well, that has to go to a top law firm. And frankly, we don't care how much we pay, within reason. The due diligence work, well, if the big law firm won't do it at the price we want, we'll send that out to somebody else who's using a ton of AI, and we'll do it at a fixed price, at a fixed speed, and we'll do it that way, and so on and so on. So the one possibility is that we get this kind of unbundling process where clients triage the work. So they say, okay, that's high risk, that's medium risk, that's very low risk. In fact, some of this we can actually do internally now because we have the AI tools as well. This bit needs to go to a big firm, this bit can go to a medium-sized firm, this bit needs to go to an ALSP, an alternative legal service provider, or a NewMod law firm, and so on and so on. So you might say to some degree that the environment is becoming more complex. There are more ways of solving legal needs. And some people, and also, I'm sure your fellow students are seeing this, is that there are more and more people self-representing in court because they're using AI, whereas before, because you can only get at least in Europe, you only get legal aid, state-funded payments for your lawyer's expenses on a very, very limited amount of cases, like usually just pure criminal cases in most scenarios. If you're having a commercial dispute and you're a person with low income, how on earth do you take the other party to court? And a lot of people are just going to Claude or ChatGPT, and they're launching cases based on the advice that they're picking up from these AI systems. And then they're getting into the court, but they don't understand the court process. And they're up against a human judge and a human counterparty. And yeah, so the legal world that you're entering now is really starting to evolve into something different. And again, we shouldn't get too carried away. I'm sure that if they went down any main street or any large commercial district and walked into a large law firm or a medium-sized firm, many of them would be the same as they were a few years ago, right? But it does seem inevitable that there's going to be significant change. Think of it as the early days of the internet, right? When in the late 80s, early 90s, there were people in America who were really into using the internet, and there were thousands upon thousands of other people who didn't even know what it was, right? There was like these two worlds operating in parallel. It's kind of like how we are now. There are thousands and thousands of lawyers who don't use AI at all and have no interest in using it, don't want to use it. But that group is going to slowly diminish, and the group using AI will just grow and grow until effectively it's everybody. In fact, one of the reasons why I don't use the phrase AI first or AI native is because every lawyer eventually will be AI first. Right? The idea that you're going to draft something, or you're going to do legal research, or you're going to draft an argument without some kind of AI input will become bizarre. It's the same way as talking about, like, here's Bob, he's a great lawyer, he's a Microsoft Word first lawyer. He'll always use Microsoft Word. It's just like, well, of course he's going to use Microsoft Word. So what else are you going to do? You're going to write everything paper, which you can, of course, you can if you want to, and get someone else to type it into a computer for you. You can do that, but in 5, 6, 7 years, I don't know how long, but it will eventually. The idea of not using AI right from the inception of any legal matter will seem as absurd as trying to conduct an entire case on just pieces of paper.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I think
Mm.
first to bring back that I do agree that this whole system is completely going to change how big law
Mm.
firms work. I remember you had a meeting with Gabe Herrera, co-founder of Harvey, where
Mm.
you said that agents can help write 200 contracts, but the senior lawyers can only review a good five
Yeah.
in a day. So I
Mm.
obviously agree with you. There is this bottleneck that this system that once used to work very well for
Mm.
these types of workloads don't do that. And I think there's going to be a lot more individual work. That is
Mm.
just a very key thing where here in the US, as you know, it's you get free right to an attorney compared to over there for very minute like cases you get.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move the topic a little bit. Specifically, you've interviewed dozens of these NewMod founders, and almost all of them say some version of we want to be the biggest or our inspiration is Amazon per se.
Yeah.
And does that ambition in your book ever become a red flag? Because what I'm trying to say is that I think in this world, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is this veneer in legal AI where specifically tools where there's this kind of hype train that always is sort of always coming. And there's
You
a
know, yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of ambition and there's a lot of ambitious people. I think my question is when you're looking at these new mod founders, can you distinguish between the ambition that they have and the actual reality, and kind of how can you separate that?
Well, I mean, that's the question, I think, for any venture-backed company, whether it's a law firm, a software company, anything. I mean, I think there's two aspects there. First one, which I've just mentioned, is that many of these new model AI first law firms have venture capital investment, which is very unusual. Most law firms self-fund, right? So, like, I'm an experienced lawyer, you're an experienced lawyer. We meet at a party and we say, hey, let's build our own law firm. I remortgage my house, you remortgage your house. We rent an office, we buy some equipment, we hire some junior lawyers, and off we go, right?
Yeah.
We fund it ourselves, in part because of regulatory reasons, as well as just practical reasons. These are very, very, very different. So what happens is that a venture capital fund, a VC fund, puts its own cash, which is growth capital, because it's expecting a 10, maybe hopefully even 20 times return at some point in the future, into what is the tech company bit. And then there's a licensing agreement with the law firm bit, and the tech bit and the law firm bit joined together. It's quite an unusual structure, but this is the structure many of them use. If you take VC cash, you have to grow fast. It's as simple as that. VC funds do not give people cash so that they can sit around for years and years and years, very, very, very slowly and incrementally growing. They might give a lot of money to a company that is doing amazing cutting edge research, like on fusion energy. And it may be in 20 years, there's going to be like 1,000 times return on that money. But generally, if you take VC cash, you're going to have to grow fast. So the founders who do that, who get into that environment, generally are very ambitious because they have to be. It's kind of a self-selecting group. Like if you went to a big VC fund and said, well, I'm planning to grow about 5% a year, which I think is quite decent. They'd just be like, this isn't for you. Right, because that's how it is. Now, there's another way of doing it, which is bootstrapping, which is a bit like what traditional law firms do. They go to the bank, they borrow some money, they remortgage their house, they borrow some money from their friends, and off they go, right? It's very low key, and they live on the revenue they make. And you do grow 5% a year, and that's regarded as pretty good. I mean, if a law firm grows 5% a year, that's seen as very, very healthy, right? It's a good, solid, respectable way to grow. And 5-10%, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. But they don't take external investment, not in the same way, right? So you've got that, but the other aspect is, I think, even more interesting. That is that the new model law firms, as going back to the earlier point, they are commoditizing legal work. So, hey, review that contract for me. Yay, $500. Bang, done, deal. Off we go, right? The more of those you do, the more money you make. The more customers you win, the more money you make, the more you grow, and on and on and on, right? So they become also marketing exercises. They also become, I mean, okay, all businesses do marketing, but if your plan is to grow 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, even 100% perhaps, once they really get going every year, right? Organically, not through buying another law firm, but literally just expanding the business like that. That changes. You have to be ambitious. You have to be ambitious. You have to believe in your brand, in your offering, and so forth. And again, that is very unusual because traditionally law firms grew slowly, and if they grew rapidly, it was generally inorganically. Like one law firm would buy another law firm, or two law firms would merge together in a kind of marriage of equals, as they call it. And so you would get growth, but it wasn't because the business was growing. It's because just more lawyers were assembling together, right? This is a very, very different prospect. This is growing in the same way that a tech company might scale. And so that hasn't really been seen before. Even when we had alternative legal service providers, ALSPs, which were not like traditional law firms, they didn't scale that fast either. So we don't know how it's going to go. I mean, I was just talking to someone earlier. I mean, there are now like 30 plus NewMod law firms around the world, many of them in the US. Many of them are also working in the same sector. They're offering to help young companies with their key contracts. And that's understandable because small companies don't have a lot of money to spend, but they have a lot of legal needs, employment contracts, issues related to their cap table, their investors, all kinds of things, structure and ownership of the company and so forth, right? They don't have a lot of money to spend. And a tech first legal business is very appealing to them. So, but how many players can you have in that market all at one time? Personally, I think they're going to have to move up market. They're going to have to move into higher quality work and start working for larger corporations. And some of them do already, right? Some do work for very large corporations, but not all of them. And I think that's where it's going to get really interesting in the future, in the coming years, is when the new mods and the traditional law firms start really bumping against each other. Because in many cases, some of the very, very large commercial law firms are not that worried about what the new mods are doing, because they're like, well, we don't really care about NDAs. Reviewing an NDA, so what? Doesn't really, it's of very little value to us. Doesn't change our offering. But if you start going up market, you start doing more complex work. That changes things. And that's when it's going to get very interesting. I don't think we're really there yet. There's only 2 or 3 players who are operating at their highest level, but more will, I think, inevitably. And that's going to be it's going to be very interesting for this new generation of lawyers coming through. Because who do you want to go and work for?
Yeah, there's a lot more different options and places to go to. And I think that's what the sheer quantity of work in this new type of jobs that AI is producing is very nerve-wracking to a lot of these people who are, well, I'm going to be a lawyer in 4 years. What do I do? Or what's going to the legal space look like in 3 years as soon as I come out? So there is this big kerfuffle that is happening with people who don't even know what it's going to look like. I think there's
nobody does. Nobody does. I mean, anyone who tells you they know exactly what it's going to look like in 5 years they don't really know. No one knows. No one
yeah.
knows. No one. The same way that no one knows what the stock market will be like in 5 years.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so just important to be updated with all the news, specifically just seeing what's happening with the new mods, because there's going to be, because that's the future and it's not going to go anywhere. We already know AI isn't going to go anywhere. So I just think it really is just keeping informed. I think for my students, just to always understand, read Artificial Lawyer, read anything, read the Substacks they're posted, read Matt Polonais.
Yeah,
I think AI Firm Index is where you're seeing all the new
yeah.
mods. I think there is a level to it, though. You shouldn't be so worried about it every single day.
No, I mean, look, I mean, overall, the total number of lawyers, at least in America, goes up every year, right?
Yes.
And in fact, as all the baby boomers retire, and many baby boomers are retiring, the work that they did is going to have to be taken up by someone else, right? So overall, the American economy and the global economy broadly is on an upward trajectory, right? There's more regulation, there are more laws, there's more compliance needs, the world becomes more technical, more complex, more legalistic, right? There are no countries on this planet that every year have less laws, right? Fewer laws, right? Every year there are more laws, and the
Yeah.
laws they have become more complex. They amend them, and there are new pages that are stuck on the bottom, right? More and more and more and more, right? I don't see that ever changing, at least not while civilization is moving in the direction it's moving in. So I don't think demand for lawyers is going to change. I think the way that lawyers work will change, and the businesses that they work in, a NewMod, a traditional law firm that started to change how it works. ALSPs, you could work in a distributed law firm. This is where quite often it's usually people who've got a few years of experience who break away, and they effectively work in a network of other lawyers, and they pick and choose what work they take. So they work on their own at home. They have their own little home office. They work at home, and they have like an umbrella organization that kind of helps them. But fundamentally, they're working by themselves. There could be hundreds and hundreds of people in this network, but they just work by themselves. And then you've got the in-house bit, where you're going to try and work there. You're going to try and go up the tree and get into the high-level strategic advisory work, where you're advising the board of the company. Or do you want to stay more on the technical and sort of more, I say industrial end, and focus on contract management and contract flows, which is also very important. So there's the idea that you kind of see on TV, that there is, hey, here's Mary, she's a lawyer, she represents people in court, and then they come back to the office and they shout at each other, or whatever you see on TV, right? I mean, like, that is such an incredibly narrow view, and I'm sure that will continue. Courts will continue, right?
Yeah.
Lawyers will go to court, right? That will continue, but it's an incredibly narrow slice of all the different things that lawyers do and will do in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. There's not enough room for 1,000 Harvey Specters or more. There's probably room for 1,000, but not for a huge. But I do agree with you that the different types of work possible for a lawyer, like jobs, this is speculation, but from what it looks like, there's a lot more places to go to, and the word lawyer or what that work entails is very broad. I think I agree with you.
It is totally. Just look at the fact that, look at in-house lawyers. I mean, like 100 years ago, only the very, very largest companies would have had lawyers working inside them. Right now, like, as soon as a company gets any kind of scale, one of the first things it does is hire a lawyer to work inside the business, because there are so many legal issues they've got to deal with, compliance and regulations and so forth. HR issues and whatever, you name it. 1,000 different issues. So they go, my God, to stay on top of this, we're going to have to hire a lawyer to actually not just work outside, but literally works inside the company, which today sounds completely normal, right? So there is this constant evolution of growing demand. Now, it's possible that we will top out at some point, that maybe AI gets so sophisticated that it does top out. But then perhaps there will be new things that lawyers will do, new areas, new demands, which we haven't even thought of, in the same way that 100 years ago, the idea that every major company would have a whole bunch of lawyers working inside them would have seemed absurd to many people, including many lawyers.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful, like, doom mongering and so forth. I mean, at least I would say over the next decade or so, I don't see anything other than growth in the legal market. I really don't.
Yeah. Wow. Just a quick time constraint, because I don't want to. I know you're a
Sure.
busy person. How much more time do you have, just so I can?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Okay. Well, I could talk to you for 2 days, but we don't have enough time for that. Is there anything you would say to, I guess, last points? Anything you would say
Yeah.
to a student who is coming in into this legal forum, into this legal space, that you would want to like say? Um,
Yeah, I'd say that one, become familiar with AI, and I'm sure everybody is already, but if you get a chance to use legal tech tools, do so. If you get an opportunity, not just for general models, but if there's an opportunity to use the legal plugins that connect to the general models, or if there's a chance to use some legal tech tools, perhaps where they have a license which is free for students, perhaps have a go, see what you can learn, use those tools. That is just a straightforward practical point, but on a sort of higher level, I'd say the world will always need good lawyers. And the reason why people need good lawyers is because they need judgment. They need a person there they can trust to give their problem to, right? As a lawyer, you're taking on this incredible duty of solving someone else's really difficult problem, and that will never go away. So there will always be demand for people to do that, and the way to become good at that is to become a very good lawyer. You know the law, but you'll be also good at working with your clients. You can see above and beyond the text to the material issues. You can use your instinct, your intuition. You can imagine solutions, and then bring them back, to the terra firma of law and regulation to make them work. But fundamentally, great lawyers will always be in demand, and that means thinking for yourself. So it's a strange balance we've got in the future, in that we're going to need to use AI to be efficient, but we're also going to have to preserve our ability to think for ourselves and to reason and to develop a sense of judgment. And developing judgment when you're young is not easy because you haven't dealt with many clients, right? If you're in your early 20s, you don't have the same experience as someone in their 40s, who will have dealt with hundreds and hundreds of clients perhaps, and who will have a great sense of judgment. Have I made the right call here? Is that right? Or going through a contract and be like, oh yeah, I've seen that 25 times before. And most people never spot that, but I spot that because I've got experience. Those things you're just going to have to cultivate. In some ways, you're almost going to have to fast track that. And it's going to be a very interesting balance, I think, for everyone, because you're going to use these AI tools to move more quickly through some of this work. But if you go through this work very quickly and you don't learn what you need to learn, then you're not going to be a great lawyer. So you're going to have to cultivate both this use of AI and also developing your skills as a real human lawyer. But I would just say to you, yeah, don't outsource your brain.
yeah.
Outsource some of the legwork, the boring work, the monotonous work, the work where you're really not learning anything. That's cool. Outsource that. But don't outsource the real thinking, because if you do that, you're not helping yourself to develop.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again for your time. I appreciate you coming on board, taking time out of your day to be able to talk.